Hi, Dr. Margie. Welcome to the show.
I am so delighted to be with you, Lauren.
Okay, so one of the first things that caught my eye about your bio, besides all your impressive accomplishments, we just talked about this, just the fact that you've written more than one book, which I think is so brave, is that you're passionate about helping people live bigger, braver lives. I'm curious, where did this intense passion come from? Because I love that.
Oh, it's such a great question, and I'm asked it regularly. I think it probably started with my early life. I grew up on a dairy farm in rural Australia, and there was lots of skin knees, but I think that environment was actually my horizons were not very big in terms of I just didn't know what was possible when you grow up in a pretty rural area. We never left it. My parents were very rural, and then when I left the home, the first in my family to ever go to college and, in the big city, that just opened my eyes to the world. And then I traveled around the world for a couple of years backpacking in my early 20s. And that experience across different cultures and continents, in the Middle East and Africa and Asia and what have you, I just think as much as we're all different and we're obviously shaped by different cultures and people have different religions and they eat different foods and all that stuff, the thing that just continually struck me when I got to know people is that we're so alike in so many of the things that drive our behavior, our desire for belonging, our fear of not belonging, our fear of failing. And so I recognized it in myself and I see it in others. And I just could what was really clear to me is that there's so much potential in people. Everyone has talents and gifts and potential. And the biggest thing that gets in the way of us living our potential is our fear. It is a lack of courage to move forward despite that fear. And so it just has always been just something on my heart. And when I decided to write my very first book, Lauren, back, I don't know, probably coming up nearly 20 years ago, I had four kids, 7 and under.
Oh
And
my
I
God.
just I had this call on me. Like I literally, it was almost, I don't want to say I felt God called to me, but I did just feel this strong call to empower people. And when I'd sit there going, well, if I'm going to write a book and I've got these little kids and it's not an easy thing to do, what is the thread that weaves through all of the messages that I want to share? And then I did have an aha moment literally on one of those ellipticals at a YMCA. So, it was not out in nature. It was like, oh my gosh, it's courage. I want to help people have more courage in their lives. And so, literally 20 years on, this is my sixth book. Um, I've lived around the world. It's my first book since living back in America. Many of them were published in Australia and in Asia. And so, I'm really excited to be sharing it. But the thread all comes back to me having to conquer my own fears so many times, but also witnessing how much fear, even unconscious fear people aren't even present to, holds them back.
Yeah, absolutely. Many people, myself included, can get stuck in these cycles of inaction and analysis paralysis. What causes this, and can we actually learn to be more courageous, or, like, is it a learnable skill, or is it one of those skills where people, I don't know, if you're born into certain cultures, you have more of it, or something like that?
Well, let me just start with the second question. And let me just say this: courage is a skill. It's like learning to make pizza dough. Though why would you bother? You could just buy it these days. But like learning to make pizza dough or play guitar or learn Spanish, if you practice it, you get better at it. And so, yes, some people have a naturally higher risk tolerance.
Yeah.
Some people are naturally more prone to feeling anxious. Some people are naturally more perfectionist, which works against being brave because we want it all to be perfect. So that holds us back. But everybody, even the most timid, shy person, can develop that muscle. And I think of it like a muscle, like going to the gym. Like the more you practice that, and there's so much science behind this, that the neural pathways in our brain, when we're doing something, when we're repeating an action, even if it's an uncomfortable action, just say I'm in a meeting and I have to speak up more in a meeting. or it's going and introducing myself to a stranger at a networking event, or it's something that's like, oh, this is a little awkward for me. But every time we do that, we strengthen that neural pathway and we kind of grow that psychological muscle. So you can probably think back to early in your career and you got asked to do a sales presentation or something. And you were just terrified. I hear people say, I didn't sleep for days. I was terrified. I got asked to present to my team. But by the time you've done it 50 times, you don't really blink. I mean, maybe you're more scared to do something else. So it's a muscle. But when it comes to, you talked about the first part of your question, which was around how come we sometimes don't do the things we know we should do? Why do we get stuck in analysis paralysis? Again, it's fear. You think about analysis paralysis. We're looking at all the options. And if you're fortunate enough to be born in the United States or we're Australia, where I was raised, we have so many options. It's almost a tyranny of choices sometimes. Some people don't have any options. They literally they don't have any, but we do. And it's fear of making a wrong decision keeps us frozen from making any decision.
Right.
And we're terrified we're going to make the wrong decision. And we're like, oh, what if I get it wrong? And as I've launched my kids off to college and then out into the world, but going off to college, what if I study the wrong subjects? What if I pick the wrong college? I'm like, everything is going to be valuable learning. Like, don't worry about it. Just pick the best one you think will be the best fit. And if it's the wrong one, you can change it or you just learn and you adapt, whatever. But I think it again is that fear of making a wrong decision. And some people are more prone to analysis paralysis. You think of people who are just really left brain analytical. They want to be
Yeah.
able to look at it all on a piece of paper and go, this is statistically clear that I should take path D.
Yeah.
Some people are naturally develop an intuitive sense and go, and I do think we do need to look at things and go, okay, we need to use our left brain and go, okay, well, that would just be crazy to do that one. And that one on the other end would be stupid to do that one. But in the middle, there's three good options. And then leaning in to that intuitive sense, our right brain and going, which one feels right?
Right.
And knowing that, you know what, just making a decision is an empowering thing to do because it moves you forward. And action is the most powerful antidote to fear. And by simply saying, I'm just going to move forward, I mean, you think about it, it's the start of a new year.
Right.
And we're looking at the whole year ahead, and people kind of go, I don't want to mess things up or I don't want to get it wrong. And I'm like, just do something, because in
Right.
doing something, you're reinforcing action, you're getting feedback, and maybe you decide you don't want to go down that path anymore. Okay, great. Isn't that great? And you've learned something.
I love that you said taking action and making decisions is the antidote to this. I think this happens a lot in people's careers where they don't know what to do. So then they just like are very reactive in their career versus proactive. And they basically just wait for something to happen. Like there are a lot of people who are in careers today where they're like, well, I got out of college and I got this job and now I'm still doing that job because the fear of the unknown, I was never willing to do something different. And then you have people who really want to make these career transitions and maybe they're going through the interview process or doing something and they get scared, or a la imposter syndrome. I have this fear that can I actually do this thing? So to your point, fear is intertwined in a lot of maybe the decisions we do make, but also the decisions we don't make, right? Because inaction is still taking an action in a way.
Yes, it is. It's just a passive, powerless action. So it doesn't empower us. I mean, it's okay to choose. I'm very consciously right now choosing not to do something. I'm aware of that versus, I don't know what to do and I'm too scared to do something. But I
Right.
want to just break down, like when we talk about courage, and I obviously I talk about it a lot, clearly, but I want to just break it down a little bit. There's two dimensions to courage. One dimension is the management of our fear. And the other dimension is our willingness to act despite our fear. But if we backtrack a little bit, let's just think back over the last 5 years, even the last 10 years. We live in a world today that our brains are 70,000 generations behind. I mean, we live in a world of 24/7 news cycles. We have devices that we hold in our hands often with news feeds that are engineered with algorithms to stoke our insecurity and anxiety. because that sells, that makes us buy things, that makes us keep clicking. And so 50 years ago, 20 years ago, we weren't doing that. And so today we have this often magnified perception of risk.
Mm,
I think the pandemic only amplified that more. People just became so anxious. And if you're anxious a lot, it just fuels itself. Anxiety breeds anxiety. So one part of courage is really stepping back and asking, is my perception of the dangers here proportional to the actual danger? Because actually we live in the most safe time in human history to be alive. I mean, if you're
right.
not in a war zone or somewhere, it is the safest time in human history to be alive. And yet we're more anxious than 100 years ago, when actually a lot of people died earlier of all sorts of ailments and things. Secondly, the second part of courage is the willingness to act in the presence of it. And so, one, people might be terrified to go and talk to their boss and ask for support and get a promotion. Well, they're terrified to change jobs. And I'm like, okay, let's just break this down. Will you die? Like, could you possibly die if you do that? And the reality is no. No, I'm really unlikely to die. Years ago, I had one of my sisters. I have three sisters and three brothers. And one of my sisters wanted to break up an engagement. And I remember her saying to me, oh, I can't break up. I'll just die. And she's actually a doctor. And I said, Anne, you're the doctor, but I'm pretty sure you're not going to die. She goes, oh, it'll just kill him. I said, and I'm pretty sure his heart will continue to beat. But even in our language, we can amplify our fear. And so for her, I said, I want you to get really present to what lays at stake here. And it's the same with changing jobs or going talking to your boss. What is at stake here, so that you need to do this even though you feel afraid, you feel sick in the belly with nervousness, you feel incredibly vulnerable, that actually I can't not do this because my life is on the line. And when I say life on the line, my happiness is on the line, my future's on the line. We spend a third of our adult lives working. We mightn't be all of us in a company physically every day, but we spend a lot of our adult lives at work. It is the biggest tragedy to spend our adult lives doing something that sucks all the joy from our life. And so that doesn't mean you love every aspect of what you do, but if you don't feel inspired by the future for yourself, you need to change the direction you're headed so that you do feel inspired, so that you can see a future that you're growing and learning and using your talents, because we thrive when we use our talents. We thrive when we're growing. We don't thrive when we're not using our strengths, when we're not learning, when we're not growing. And so we often look at the short term and go, oh my gosh, what if I leave this job and don't get a better one? What if I leave this company and I go to somewhere else and it's worse? What if the what ifs, and we go down this what if rabbit hole of,
Right.
which just makes us anxious. Instead, I just want to say, and what if you stay? What if you just stay here forever? Like, you don't even know what opportunities you're missing out on. But let me tell you, you are missing out on opportunities because you're not doing it. So the cost that we pay when we don't be brave, it's usually not immediate. It's not obvious. There's this hidden, I call it a timidity tax. And so when I'm working with people to help them, I call it closing the courage gap, because our fear creates the gap between what we can do and what we're doing, and between where we are and where we really want to be. And it takes courage to close that gap. And so one is, let's just reframe fear so that you're not afraid of things that really you don't need to be. And two, let's get really clear about what lays at stake here and why the biggest risk you take is actually not leaning in and taking that risk or making that change.
Yeah, this makes me think of, there's this funny meme on Instagram where it's like, am I running away from a tiger, or am I just answering the email? Like, to your point, like sometimes you're like, answering this email is so big and scary to me, but am I treating it with this urgency that really is like this fight or flight mode? And you're like, this is unnecessary. It's just responding to an email, right? So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
like that you mentioned that. Okay, I want to get into, you do have kind of a five-step process that helps people override that kind of naturally fearful instinct and reset basically their relationship with discomfort. So can we go through your first step? So number one is focus on what you want, not what you fear. Can you talk about that one a little bit?
Yeah. So this is the first step because we have to be clear about what we most want. And, one of the biggest thing that stops people getting what they want in their life is honestly, they cannot clearly answer the question what they really want. And I
Yeah.
mean, really want. I don't mean, oh, I want to lose 5 pounds and I want to earn 200K a year. I mean, like, what is it that sets your heart on fire? Like, what do you really, really want? And so getting clear about what you want correlates very strongly with you taking the actions that will help you get what you want. So what we focus on expands. And often our brain, being having a negativity bias as it does, we focus on what we don't have, on what we can't do, on what we don't want. Oh, I don't want to lose my job. Oh, I don't want to get embarrassed in front of this group. Oh, I don't want to like mess this up. I don't. And we talk a lot about what we don't want. We also talk a lot about what we can't do. Oh, I just don't have enough experience, enough money, enough this, enough that, enough time. I'm not old enough. I'm, not young enough, whatever. And so we often focus on what we don't have, what we don't want, what we can't do. And so there is just immense power that we tap into when we bring our attention toward what we do want. And so your desire for what you want has to exceed your fear of what you don't want. And unless you're clear about what you want, your fear of avoiding what you don't want will direct your life. So get really clear about what you want, not just today and for dinner tonight, but what do you want for your life, the biggest enterprise of all? What do you want in your career? What kind of things do you want to do more of? What are your strengths and talents that you love? Like, what is it that you love doing? And maybe you can't do it 100% of the day, but you can do more of it than you are right now. What
Mhm.
value do you want to add? What people do you want to work with? What kind of organization do you want to be part of? What difference do you want to make? And so just answering those questions, taking some time, and I have a workbook that goes with my book that just helps people just get that clarity. There is such a power in just getting clear about what it is you want.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think a lot of people will say something like, I want a new job that pays me more, but it's like, okay, what do you really want? Maybe what you really want is you want to have job security. You want to feel secure in safe when it comes to your finances because that's been a stressor. So it's like it's taking it like a layer deeper. Like maybe you can start with I want a new job that pays me more, but to your point, like ask more questions and go deeper because that's not quite deep enough. Is that what you're kind of saying a little bit with when
Yeah,
people
no,
say this
and
is what I
yes,
want?
absolutely. Like it's okay. I mean, we all like to earn money, and that's an awesome thing. So great, you want to earn money, but earn money doing what? Because there's lots of ways we can earn more money. And security, yes, we all have a need for security. I know I grew up without any money. I've always wanted to have financial security in my adult life because I know what it's like not to have it, and I
Right.
didn't like that. And so that's a driver. And it drives some people more than it drives other people. But also being clear that you need to have specificity around what you want. Like, why do you want that? I would ask someone and go, well, why do you want that? Well, because it'll make me feel good. Okay, so why will it make you feel good? Oh, because and so really just getting really underneath, peeling back the layers of the why. What is it that you want at that core level? Because if you just keep it at a superficial level, I mean, you might get it, but you find
Yeah.
yourself still wanting more, right?
Yeah, totally. This makes me think, I just worked on something for work. It was called the 5 why analysis. And basically you ask yourself why 5 times. And it reminds me of my toddler. She's always like, why, why? And I'm
Yeah,
like, at some point I go, I
because
don't
I
know, but
said so.
yeah, exactly. But it is like, it's a good question for adults. So don't just stop at the first why, go a little deeper with that. That's really good advice. Okay, so the second tip for helping people break this cycle of inaction, you said rescript what's keeping you stuck, stressed, or living too safely. So tell us more about what you mean with that.
Well, yeah, we as humans are sort of story making machines. We're wired for narrative. If you think about
Yep.
it, I mean, people listening to this now are going to be just in their head. They're going to be going, "Oh, I like what they're saying. I don't like what they're saying. I like her accent. I don't understand what she's saying." Um, So we're always got this talk track going. And we create stories about ourselves, about our situation. We have stories about the family we grew up in. You might have siblings that they have a different story. I certainly do, just because of my birth order, etc. You have stories about what's possible for your future. And so our stories, we treat them as though they're the truth, but they're not. They're just a story that we're telling ourselves. And sometimes the stories we're telling ourselves can make us feel really stressed,
Yeah.
unnecessarily anxious, so we can suffer more from our stories than the reality. They can keep us stuck. They can keep us in analysis paralysis. They could keep us settling for something we don't like because we tell ourselves, oh, I just don't have it what it takes to make a change, or I'm just not one of those people, or I just can't do that. They can keep us living too safely so that we're living a much smaller life than really we truly want to live and that honors who we really want to be. And so our stories, which are kind of like wrapped up in our belief system, it's like the operating system for our behavior. And so anytime you find yourself in a situation, you keep finding yourself in a situation where you're not feeling positive and you're not feeling purposeful and you're not feeling empowered, inside that situation is a story you're telling yourself that's keeping you from dealing with that situation more effectively. So we create our stories and our stories create us. And so by rescripting the stories that are stoking our stress or sapping our confidence, we enable ourselves to open up a whole lot of new possibilities. So let me just share an example with you. I was working in corporate marketing early in my career in my 20s. And in my later 20s, I was married, started having a family, and I got really clear. A couple of big events happened. I was in an armed robbery. I lost my first pregnancy at 20 weeks. A few big events happened that kind of rocked my world, and it made me step back and go, what do I really want? Um, and I decided to change career direction. I decided I really want to pursue down a path of coaching and empowering other people. And so I went back to study part-time, and in between I had started having a family. And then we moved to the United States from Australia. And I had 3 young children. I was living in Dallas, Texas. And I wanted to start this business, but I also had no family. I didn't know anyone. And I remember just thinking, and I'd always thought I wanted 4 kids, but I was like, you can't have 4 kids and have a career. You can't do that. I mean, I remember telling people that you just can't have 4 kids and have a career. And that was a story. I was treating it like the truth. And then someone challenged me and they called BS on that. And they said, that's just not true. And I didn't know anyone. I didn't have any role models. And someone said, I know someone who has. And I said, I don't know anyone that's doing it. And I went out and actively found people that were women who had 4 children and they had a career. And I found out, yes, they got a lot more help than I'd been getting. It was like how I was going about doing life. I needed to change it. I needed to just get more help. And I'd never been very good at getting help. But I share that with you because I had to rewrite the story that I couldn't have a meaningful career and also be a good mom to 4 kids.
Right.
And so, but I meet people all the time and they say, I've got a client at the moment and she's like, oh, I'm not one of those people who's egotistical that's always going up to the boss and telling the boss how great they are. I just get the work done and I should be rewarded for that. And I said, well, are you noticing that other people are getting promotions that frankly don't have your level of experience? And she said, yeah, it's really frustrating. I said, maybe it's because the CEO knows that they're really hungry and they want those roles. And she goes, well, he should just know that I want them too. And I said, who says he should? You just never let him know. And you're saying, I don't want to be egotistical. Well, that's you being a little egotistical by not putting yourself forward and telling him, this is what I really want. You're so committed to appearing humble that you're actually getting in your own way from letting people who could put you in roles that would help you grow and develop do that. So
Yeah.
all the time we've got these stories and we have to be careful about how they're hemming us in.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And it kind of goes back to what you said earlier, which is like not taking action is still an action. And so the first thing to do is to take action. And maybe it's to think when these, like, when do these stories pop up? What is the story that you tell yourself? Is it true? And like really try to examine it from a place of no judgment zone. It's okay if your story isn't accurate, and we all have them. Okay, you have three more steps, and I kind of want to wrap up, and maybe we can
Okay. Yes,
combine
we'll
them a
move
little bit.
fast.
Yeah, so you have embodied courage is step three. Step four is step into discomfort, and step five is find the treasure when you trip. So I
Mhm.
guess in this breaking the cycle of inaction, try to consolidate these three steps into your general advice of what you would share.
Yeah. Well, look, firstly, I would just say with embodying courage, our fear lives in the body, and there's different ways that we can empower ourselves. One is in the stories we tell ourselves. One is how we hold ourselves physically, shifts how we feel psychologically, emotionally. But stepping into discomfort, sometimes we have to behave our way into believing. If
Yeah,
you're waiting until you feel confident to make that change, to take that chance, to go and have that conversation, you might be waiting till you're 87.
yeah.
So embrace discomfort as a cue to move forward. But recognizing also that not every time you're brave are you going to land the winning outcome that you want. And so that final step is about forgiving yourself when you fail, but learning from your failures. Don't fail to learn the lessons failures hold. And also forgive yourself in those moments when you wimp out, because there's nothing to be gained by beating up on yourself. And recognizing that all of us have moments where our fear wins out, but we can pick ourselves up more quickly and we can move forward more bravely when we can forgive that inner wimp that lives inside all of us and reconnect to that bravest part of ourselves, physically, emotionally, psychologically, and then stepping forward. And to everyone that's listening, and I'm just really, really honored to be able to speak to you today, I would just say to you, right now, today, there is something that you could be doing that will be a little uncomfortable, and embrace discomfort as the ticket price for you to move towards the future that you most want.
I really like that. We just had someone on who said failure is a much better teacher than success. And that really stuck with me because it's what you're saying, which is be kind to yourself when you fail, but also failure is you're learning. You took action, you tried something new, you got, in that pocket of discomfort and you didn't die from it. And so you will take more risks as you go, and confidence is built by taking action, which is kind of the irony of trying to learn how to be more confident. Is like, well, actually, it's just really a series of getting started with these baby steps. So your book, tell us about as we wrap up, your book is called The Courage Gap. Tell people a little bit about it, and then obviously where they can find it as well.
Yes, thank you so much. Yes, The Courage Gap. Uh it is a book that is breaks down. I mean, there's a whole lot of science underneath it all, but I wanted to create something that was extremely practical and accessible. So it's a very simple 5-step framework. And we all have moments where we know what we should do and we don't do it. You're
Right.
like, oh, I really should have that conversation. I really should. And yet we don't do it. And so it's a book to help us close the gap between that thought and the action we take, so that we do lean in and we take those actions and we close that gap. And not just so that we can have more success, like, great, I want you to earn more money. I want you to have the job of your dreams. Absolutely. But I also, what I want most of all for everyone that's listening, I want you to grow into the person that you can become. And that is always going to require courage in some way. And so, at the core of this book is really helping people grow into the fullest version of who they have it within them to become. Um, and I wrote it over the last couple of years. I share a lot of personal stories, a few heartaches in there. I share stories from working with some extraordinary people around the world, and people just like you and me who have moments. We have good days and we have not good days. And I wanted just to have this book that people could pick up and read again and again and again. I have a courage quiz and a workbook that you can also get from the URL, which is thecouragegap.com. But people can just go to my website. And of course, the book, it's audiobook as well. I narrated it myself. And it's obviously on ebook and it's on Amazon. So I hope everyone will grab a copy and that they'll find it a really useful resource for years to come.
Yeah, I think this is like such a good time of year to be picking up the quiz, the workbook, the book, and thinking about, okay, 2025, what are going to be the, how am I going to solve my own courage gap that I have and what is it? So Margie, this has been a super enlightening conversation. I love conversations about this because I do think it kind of lights the fire under us a little bit. And as you said, this is all science back too, but they have to get all that in the book. Thank you so much for joining today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Lauren. It's been great to talk to you.